Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, all eyes on the Philadelphia corridor as Netanyahu insists on Israeli control of it. Plus, the new documentary, Unrwa at War, reveals the grooming of a generation to murder Jews. And standing up to an oppressive regime, celebrating Iranian heroes. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. This week, in a passionate speech to the country, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described how Hamas is trying to divide the Jewish state. At the same time, its citizens are experiencing days of horror, sorrow, and rage after the murder of 6 hostages.
In a sometimes emotional press conference, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's willing to negotiate to free the hostages, but making concessions to Hamas is a non-starter.
I'm willing to make a deal. I made one already. One that brought back 150 hostages, 117 alive, and I'm committed to return the remaining 101. I'll do everything I can to get them in. But leaving Philadelphia does not advance the release of the hostages.
He says he was already willing to make a deal earlier this year, but Hamas refused. And now the only thing that's changed is Hamas murdering 6 more Israeli hostages.
Now the world will seriously demand that Israel make concessions after this massacre? What message does this send to Hamas? I'll tell you what the message is. Murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. That's not only illogical. It's not only immoral, it's downright insane.
The IDF released footage showing the shaft leading to the tunnel where the bodies of the 6 hostages were found. It was through a children's play area with stuffed animals and cartoon characters on the wall. Thousands of Israeli protesters have taken to the streets, demanding a hostage deal. But Netanyahu says that's part of a Hamas plan to sow discord, citing a document found in an underground command post outlining the terror group's strategy.
Push photos and videos of hostages, put it out in the media, because that creates enormous psychological pressure. Who's not affected by it? Second, increase psychological pressure on defense minister. Third, continue blaming Netanyahu. And fourth, claim ground operation will not release hostages.
Jeff Balaban of the American Center for Law and Justice told CBN News, Israelis relate more like a family to one another, with all the emotion and bickering rather than a religion or a country.
This family is in anguish since October 7th. It's deep, it's unresolved, and unresolved anguish turns to anger often. And angry people are easier to manipulate. But the vast majority, whether they like Bibi or not, whether they supported Netanyahu or not, understand that right now there must be unity, and they are behind this unity government.
Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, told CBN News, Israel must be strong to go forward.
We live in a very tough neighborhood. We have to be strong. We have to project our strengths. That is why, at the end of the war, Hamas will not be in Gaza. We will send a message to our enemies that we will fight back. We are determined to stay where we are and to build our beautiful nation.
Danon says Israel and the U.S. have strong ties that will remain.
The strength of the bond between Israel and the U.S. is based on values. That is why the bond will stay strong. We share the same values of freedom, democracy. We are fighting evil. The same forces that are fighting us today will fight the U.S. tomorrow. We thank the U.S. for standing with Israel, and we believe that with God's help, we will prevail.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The White House says a deal for a ceasefire and release of some hostages is about 90% done. However, the deal revolves around a strategic piece of land along the Egyptian-Gazan border. Take a look. Even though it says a deal is close, the White House admits Hamas's terror tactic of threatening to execute more hostages and having just killed 6 last week is pressuring negotiators to seal a ceasefire deal, while at the same time making it harder to engage in talks with Hamas.
And absolutely created a sense of even greater urgency to get the deal. it also underscores how difficult it is to negotiate with a guy like Mr. Sinwar.
Despite an administration denial, Israel says a possible hostage deal revolves around the fate of the Philadelphia corridor, which Hamas can use to smuggle weapons into Gaza and threaten Israel again. At his press conference this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said control of this strategic land is crucial to achieving the goals of Israel's war to defeat Hamas.
You want to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, you can't let Hamas rearm. It's obvious. So you have to control the corridor.
Netanyahu says letting Hamas control the corridor again is an invitation to another October 7th.
So people said, yeah, but if you stay, this will kill the deal. And I say, such a deal will kill us.
Netanyahu says control of the corridor is also vital to prevent Hamas from smuggling the hostages out of Gaza. Reportedly, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar planned to use the tunnels along the corridor to leave Gaza with the hostages and flee to Iran. Tens of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets to pressure Netanyahu to accept a deal that would give up control of the corridor and release the hostages. Columnist Melanie Phillips noted despite the thousands on the streets, most Israelis get this. In one opinion poll, 79% agreed that Israel needed to control the Philadelphia permanently to prevent weapon smugglings from Egypt to Gaza. And even as the Biden administration pushes Israel for a ceasefire deal, Netanyahu points out that Israel has accepted U.S. proposal 3 times already this year, but Hamas has rejected them. Amid the talks for a deal, Israel's warfare goes on as the IDF takes out more Palestinian terrorists, while also being hit with more than 1,300 rockets from Hezbollah in August alone, the most since October 7th. Still, for now, the focus is on the hostage talks and the murder of those 6 captives. In Jerusalem, hundreds of Israelis came to sit Shiva, the traditional Jewish 7 days of mourning, with Rachel and Joan Goldberg Poland. Some waiting for hours just to sit for a few moments with the grieving parents, whose son, Israeli-American Hirsch, was murdered by Hamas, along with 5 other Israelis.
That was a body blow, which has affected my neighborhood since one of the hostages, Hirsch, Goldberg Poland, is from our neighborhood. But all of Israel suffers from this. And our friends suffer from this. And our friends are praying with us, which we appreciate.
Coming up, a new film exposing a twisted Unrwa curriculum, teaching children to aspire to become murderers. The very name Bethlehem evokes bucolic images of the birthplace of the biblical King David and Jesus. Now a new film indicates the next Hamas war against Israel may come from that once holy town. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more on how the United Nations is actually paving the way for the next attack.
When Israel entered Gaza after October 7th, soldiers found evidence that Hamas had used Unrwa facilities for training and weapons storage, with a number of UN workers working with the group.
Hamas's relationship with UNRWA is good, very good. We assist UNRWA and Hamas cooperates with UNRWA on many levels.
For years, CBN News has reported how Hamas uses UN schools and summer camps in Gaza to indoctrinate thousands of children. They're taught to hate and even kill Jews while learning Israel is an illegitimate state that should be destroyed.
You're the generation that is being trained to fight. Although you're young, you're being trained for holy war.
Now a new film by the Nachum Bedin Center for Near East Policy Research shows how this education of hate is being spread to young students in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. David, tell us about your new film.
The new movie, UNRWA at War, will show how UNRWA instigated the war from day one, show how UNRWA is preparing a new war in the area of Bethlehem. In the 4 UNRWA refugee camps in Bethlehem.
What would a war coming from Bethlehem look like?
It would spill out into Beit Shemesh, into Efrat, into Jerusalem, and with similar atrocities. Because from their point of view, the end justifies the means. And they've been educated since August 1st, 2000 in the new school system to believe that they have a right to take back any land lost in 48 by force of arms.
Yeah. Bethlehem is only about 5 miles from Jerusalem. Badin's crew interviewed children and teenagers in 4 nearby UNRWA refugee camps and asked, can Jerusalem be divided between Palestinians and Jews?
No, we won't agree to it. It's impossible. Jerusalem is ours, and we won't give up Jerusalem. We will give our souls for Al-Aqsa if Jews will take it. Israel will not withdraw from our land. We have to fight for it. We have to fight in order to free Palestine, and with Allah's help, we will have our land. What is the solution to Jerusalem? To kill the Jews. We'll get rid of the Jews. My only desire is to become a martyr.
There will never be peace between the Palestinian and the Zionist state. I desire a martyr's death so I can become a role model for the next generation who seek to give their soul to Palestine.
Interesting also that it's Bethlehem, which has a real strong biblical connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is the whole point.
Yeah.
That Bethlehem is recognized around the world. But when we conducted one of our short films shows the children there wanting all to go, to think that they all should live in Malcha, which is now a thriving neighborhood in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And they think they're going back there, and they think they're going to take their people's homes and kill everybody there. Again, the difference between this and a regular terrorist organization is that this is not encouraging hatred, this is encouraging murder.
Yeah. How can it be stopped?
You have a law enforcement system, and anyone who's involved with terror gets arrested and stopped. It's not a rocket scientist. This can happen. But if there's a will, there's a way. And trying to have easy solutions. There's at least 12 prominent personalities around the world, so just get rid of UNRWA. Well, I'd like to be the king of Siam also. You can't do everything, or as a great rabbi once said, you can't always get what you want. Mm-hmm. Well, think of who said that. But you can't always get what you want. You can't just get rid of it. What you can do is you can introduce policy initiatives that will change the situation.
Badin says it's important to introduce policies that will change policies if you want the situation to improve. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I'm joined now in our studio with Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl. Great story, but very sobering.
Yes, Chris. And, if our viewers want to see it, they can go to IsraelBehindTheNews.com and click on UNRWA at War 2024. Yeah. It really is. It's very sobering. And, if you think this has been going on for decades and people just didn't listen, and the people who carried out the October 7th attack probably were educated in UNRWA schools, probably went to UNRWA summer camps, learned how to use weapons, and that's why they didn't feel bad at all to rape and murder and kill, because that's what they learned in school. In school. Mm-hmm. And it's paid for mostly by donations. The
United States.
The U.S. is part of that. They are the highest donor since 1950, giving over $7.3 billion to UNRWA, and in the 2023 they gave 30% of the contributions. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about that, that means you're involved in it. The other point is, if you really care about the Palestinians, then you should want them to be educated for life and not for death.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to enter into this. So it's tragic, I think.
Yeah,
also.
I think so too. Great story. And David Badin has really been a voice in the wilderness, crying about this for many years.
He certainly has. He deserves credit.
Thanks, Julie. Up next, a global movement suppressing free speech rising up in democracies around the world. A global fight over freedom of speech is underway. More countries are passing laws to regulate so-called hate speech and disinformation online. In America, free speech advocates argue that's part of what the First Amendment was designed to protect. Dale Hurd has the story.
A censorship movement is rising in the world's democracies, whether it's British citizens charged over their social media posts, France's arrest of the owner of the social media platform Telegram, Brazil's shutting down X after Elon Musk refused to comply with censorship restrictions, or Mark Zuckerberg's admission that the Biden White House pressured Facebook and Instagram to censor stories it didn't like.
This anti-free speech movement is the most sophisticated, largest, and global movement we have ever faced.
Legal scholar Jonathan Turley is the author of The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage.
I think that the problem with free speech is that every generation has to defend it. And this generation has never been more divided because they have been told that free speech is going to hurt them.
A poll this year found nearly 1 in 3 Americans now believe the First Amendment goes too far.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
The freedom to say what the majority doesn't like is the very foundation of a free society. And yet that bedrock freedom is increasingly being tossed aside. An investigation by the Foundation for Freedom Online found documents from Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, that seemed to indicate as recently as last year that the agency worked with platforms to censor speech by labeling people posting so-called misinformation as domestic threat actors. The website was then scrubbed from the internet but was found using the Wayback Machine. A CISA spokesman said the agency has never censored anyone and that the material was probably removed because it created a misunderstanding. But CISA is a part of Homeland Security, which tried to create a disinformation czar. Documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act from USAID, a State Department program intended to strengthen democracies overseas, show that the agency encourages other nations to censor social media. In other Western democracies, the censorship situation is even worse. In Great Britain, a nation most Americans used to consider a bastion of democracy, police charge thousands of citizens each year over their social media posts.
Arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network.
A British official also threatened to extradite Americans who stir up trouble in the UK through online posts. The European Union no longer has free speech online, according to technology expert Dr. Norman Lewis with the think tank MCC Brussels. Lewis says only speech approved by the EU government is allowed.
What we have operating in Europe is what I call it's a censorship operating system.
Laws like the EU's Digital Services Act force technology companies to remove content Brussels doesn't like.
They want to control the public square. And so, formally speaking, there's free speech. But when you have such vague definitions as hate speech or any of these new, woke ideologies, is all about controlling speech. So you can formally uphold free speech, but in reality, it means that you curb stuff that you don't like.
One EU official threatened Elon Musk over his interview with Donald Trump.
There really is what I call an EU Ministry of Truth. George Orwell would recognize this within a millisecond.
America's First Amendment was written to prevent this kind of censorship. By defending speech the majority finds offensive, insulting, and even verbally abusive. The Supreme Court has said the First Amendment protects the freedom to express the thought that we hate.
Free speech is a natural right. That was how the framers viewed it when they wrote the First Amendment. They believed that free speech was a gift from God, that it belonged to you as a human being. It wasn't granted to you by the government. It's not tolerated by the government. The government has to protect it because it defines you as a human being.
Some say one reason for the recent riots in Britain is that citizens were not allowed to publicly express their frustrations about mass migration without being arrested. Ken Paulson, the former editor-in-chief of USA Today and director of the Free Speech Center at Middle Tennessee State University, says the First Amendment freedom of speech is vital to America's existence.
I believe that we need an environment in which all ideas can be shared, regardless of merit. And unless you are able to speak as you wish, then there is no way we remain rich and strong as a nation.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, celebrating uncommon courage and 3,000 years of friendship between the Iranian and the Jewish people. Iranian-American filmmaker Houmen Khalili has a big vision to put up 18 murals in Israel highlighting the ancient friendship between Persians and the Jewish people. He stopped by our studio after the unveiling of his 15th mural. Houmen Khalili, thanks so much for being with us. You know, it's really been a privilege, a blessing for us to cover what you've been doing here in Israel with these murals. Tell us about the latest.
So the latest mural is in Ramat Gan. And, you know, since October 7th, there were 2 Persian Jews who were killed by Hamas. And I want the world to know that of the 15 million Jews in the world, 500,000 of them are Iranian Jews. And so it was very important to me to educate the world. This latest mural features Mahsa Amini because she seems to be the figurehead for this woman-led revolution. Yeah. Next to her is a woman named Mercedes. And Mercedes, her eye was shot out by the Islamic regime because she showed her hair. She doesn't live in Iran anymore. I was able to contact her, get her permission to use her face. And I used an eagle to cover her eye and give her the eye of the eagle. In the center of the mural, you've got the 3 Persian Jews. You have Sharel, you have Sahar, and you have Queen Esther. I wanted to put them together as well. Next to them, you've got 3 Iranian athletes who were all put in prison or had an eye shot out for showing their hair. And then lastly, you have Tumaj. He is basically the Jay-Z, the Eminem, the Puff Daddy of Iran in terms of his rapping and his music. He's been in prison for 2 years. The only Tumaj murals in the entire world are here in Israel. I've done them all. There's 3 now. And, you know, you see in social media, all eyes on Gaza, all eyes on Gaza. I'm saying all eyes on Tumaj, all eyes on Iran, because Iran is the head of the snake. Yeah. The background of the mural is Mount Gerizim. Mount Gerizim is a place that Abraham was very close to, visited, but it's also the place when Jesus visited the woman at the well. And the woman at the well was referring to a mountain where her ancestors used to worship.
Well, Houmen, we were down there at the unveiling and we talked to a few people, Hananya Naftali and Emily Schrader, and here's what they had to say.
It attracts the attention of Israelis. They look at it, they ask questions, and they Google, who are these people painted on this wall? And I have to say that it's really important because then they know and they learn the stories of the Iranian people, that they're actually victims of the same radical Islam that we are combating.
Now we see, as a result of this, that a real conversation has started between the Iranian community, both in the diaspora and inside of Iran, that is supporting Israel. A lot of Israelis didn't even know that there was such an affinity for the Jewish community and the Jewish world before these murals.
Well, Houmen, you've heard what they had to say. What's your reaction?
Well, Emily Schrader was instrumental in this whole project coming together. She's the one that introduced me to Fleur Hassan, the vice mayor of Jerusalem. Both Hananya and Emily understand history. They understand the 3,000 years of friendship between the Persians and the Jews. But the greatest thing about what both of them said is, when October 7th happened, the Israeli government, the people of Israel could have said, no more murals, but they didn't. They said, let's press in. Let's keep showing the world that even during this time of tragedy and difficulty, we still stand, we Jews still stand with the freedom-fighting women of Iran. Look, recently there were 6 people that were just murdered, that were found in Gaza. And still, We did this unveiling. We just did this 15th unveiling and the 16th unveiling. So the dedication of the Jewish people to rebuilding this bridge that has been 3,000 years of friendship, is heartwarming, to say the least. And at the most, it shows that this relationship is a biblical relationship, and God's hand is on Iran, and God's hand is on Israel, and God wants these two cultures to come together.
Yeah. Many people refer to that possibility as the Cyrus Accords, just an addition to the Abraham Accords.
Amen to that, yes. Bring forth the Cyrus Accord, bring forth the Abraham Accords, because Iran will be free, and Iran and Israel will be friends again.
Well, that's a great hope and a great story. That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN apps. And please pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the return of all the hostages, and for comfort for hostage families who are mourning their loved ones. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.